Welcome back to Tell Tells, where we are underway of our cheap reel challenge. This will be part 2. In part 1, we removed the level wind off of our cheap $30 Shakespeare Arsenal fishing reel, and through that we were able to increase the original casting distance from 25 yards up to 50. So for part 2, our improvement is going to be on the topic of fishing line. Now, when we started our testing, we were using this Zebco OmniFlex 30-pound line monofilament. And we're going to move from monofilament to braid. You can see this. And some of you are wondering why. And there's quite a few reasons why you might move to braid, not just for casting distance, but to kind of go over some of that. Monofilament line has what we call memory. If you can see this here, this monofilament line has come off of a spool, yet it still looks like a slinky. And it will maintain that shape. It wants to retain that shape. And so as you are casting, this line actually has to unwind. It has to fight the rotational twist in that line to straighten out and cast. And that takes energy. That takes your cast energy. Another reason why you might want to move from monofilament or fluorocarbon to braid is the diameter of the line. So this is some heavy 30-pound line and it's quite thick. And so if you are fishing for something like sturgeon where you want to have 200 yards of line on your spool, you're going to need a much larger and generally poorer casting reel. The larger you go, the poorer they cast. To have 200 yards of really thick monofilament, and to have it in a strong enough poundage for that to work out. So as an example of that, I've got this Seaguar 101 10-pound fluorocarbon. And it has a line diameter of 0.011 inches. 10-pound line, 0.011. Here I've got this P-line braid that is 40-pound line. Now this 40-pound braid has a line diameter of 0.013 inches. So 0.011, 0.013, very comparable, except for the fact that this is only 10-pound test line and this is 40-pound test. So for practically the same amount of line diameter or the same amount of line on the spool, you'd get maybe 150 yards of each of these. Rather than having 10-pound line, you have 40-pound line. The other thing about that braid, like we've talked about with memory, is braid has none. It simply lays. It doesn't coil. It doesn't maintain its shape. And because it is so smooth and I guess you might say limp coming off of that reel, it tends to cast much further. In addition to casting further, braid doesn't stretch. It just doesn't. Maybe under a huge load or right before it breaks, you might see a little bit of stretch, but with something like mono, you can really stretch it. It has a lot of stretch, probably 10, 15, 20% built in. And that affects things like hook sets. When you try to set the hook and you've got 50 yards of line out there and that tension goes into the line rather than the fish's mouth, you can lose fish. So we are going to be spooling up our Shakespeare Arsenal 20, removing this Zebco 30-pound line and replacing it with this 60-pound braid. So it's a little bit larger in poundage braid, but it's something more realistic to what I'd be using for catfishing or otherwise. And it's still quite a bit thinner than this Zebco monofilament. And with that, let's get out to the field. Now in our first video, we were testing this reel with 30-pound monofilament. Now, we have moved over to braided fishing line. this braided fishing line is a lot smoother, a lot more pliable, and most of all, it has no memory. So as this comes off the spool, it really shouldn't fight the spool as it travels down the line guides and downfield during our casting test. Now, we've been able to achieve a 50-yard cast on the Zebco 30-pound line. So today the question is, can we beat that, and by how much? Now, if any of you have casted braid with heavy lures, you know that it can do a little bit of damage to your thumb while you thumb that spool. So today I'm going to run a glove just to help cast and keep my thumb in shape as I try to put some effort into these casts, and hopefully really find a new personal best with this reel, hopefully well beyond 50 yards. And so with that, let's give it a go. Let's go see just how far we were able to cast that. Gonna have to take off the jacket and do a little better. That cast went around 48 yards. So while not a bad cast by any standard, it certainly doesn't beat any of our previous casts. I'm guessing with just a little bit of finesse, I'm gonna be able to outcast that monofilament line. Let's try that again. That time we had a backlash. Not a bad one. I took the glove off, and so I was a little cautious about throwing my thumb on it. For a backlash, pretty minor, but nonetheless not what we want to see. One of the big troubles you have when it comes to backlashing braid is it will really dig that braid in down past other layers on your spool, and it'll make it so other casts repeatedly want to stop at essentially the exact same spot, because that line has just dug itself down so deeply into the spool that it kind of wants to get stuck there moving forward. There we go. I just wanted to pull that line out well past the backlash. That way I could avoid that problem on a future cast where that line is kind of dug down deep. Let's try a little harder this time around. I'm thinking that's going to be a new PB on this rod. So I'm going to go give that a look. Pull that line tight. Let's just see where we landed. yards. 60-yard cast. We have a new PB with this reel. Let's see if we can do any better. Not to say that was bad. We've gone from this reel out of the box casting 25 yards to, at this point, now 60 with just 2 minor modifications. something that anybody could do at home with a screwdriver and a little bit of desire to do so. And a quick trip to a fishing supply store where you could get yourself some braided line. I'm pretty happy with that last cast, but let's see if we can do any better yet. That might just have done it. Let's go check it out. "69 yards. That is a new personal record with this reel and this combo. It just goes to show how making little differences in your fishing setup can really have a big outcome in the way it affects your outcomes. I'm really happy with that. But now that we are just 1 yard away from 70 yards, I can't help but go for it. I will say this, doing reel testing like this is one way to supplement your daily steps and really help you get to those steps in. On that last cast though, I will say my thumb was getting hot as that spool is just ripping around. It just builds up friction against your thumb, and that was a cast I was kind of wishing I would have had my glove on for. But I will say this, when you're using a glove, it's just another change that it requires a little getting used to have that proper thumb pressure on the spool. And I'm finding it's just a little easier for me to cast without it. Now, a few more casts like the last one and I might change my mind and I might put that glove right back on. So for that last cast, I stood right at the 70-yard marker and was able to get it to just off here to my left, which really lands us right at 66 yards. So I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to get that 70-yard mark, but we're gonna give it just a couple more casts and see if we can do it. Otherwise, we might be at that kind of next threshold for another improvement to this reel. So while I'm certainly not sad about 66 yards, especially considering this rod is using bushings instead of bearings, I'd really like to see just another yard or so on this cast. So let's see what we can do. Well, we have officially done it. I was able to cast that direction 73.5 yards, which got me feeling just a little bit cocky. So I stood myself back to the 75-yard line and was able to launch this another 73.5 yards with one problem. The line backlashed, and while my lead sinker landed at just about the 74-yard line, the line is no longer attached to my fishing reel. So I think we're right at about the limits of this current configuration and my casting ability. But we have seen that moving from 30-pound monofilament to this braided line has taken our casting distance from just 50 yards to now over 70. Which is also amazing to think about when you consider that this reel out of the box was only casting 25 yards. We're almost 3 times that distance, just a couple yards shy of 3 times that distance. And I'm sure if I sat here and I gave it another 5 or 10 casts, we could get it there. But I think it's fair to say that having casted this now, a dozen times, my realistic casting ability is somewhere between 65 and 70, 73 yards, without running into really aggressive backlashes or problems that would, make negligible the ability to cast that far while fishing due to, broken line and backlashes. Those aren't something you want to have happen while fishing. But I feel pretty confident saying that I would be able to cast this on repeat over 60 yards and, when necessary, almost 75 yards. A solid 70 for sure. Welcome back. We have finished casting out of the field today and we are back home. And just to recap where we started, a reel that was casting 25 yards is now casting over 70, and we're just at part 2 of the cheap reel challenge. So what I'd like to know is, what would you like to see next? We have the option to increase the length of our pole or the weight of our sinker. We have the option to add bearings into this reel where there were previously bushings. We can add a monomag conversion. If you've ever seen surf casters spinning that knob on the side of their reel. Or we could work really hard to do some casting technique like a Hatteras cast or some of those other, surf cast, long cast techniques. If you have any questions, put those down below. I'd love to hear from you and what you'd like to see next. And remember, like and subscribe. It helps this channel to grow and to put out more content like this. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.